On Saturday, we wrecked in practice. On Sunday, almost won the race. I'm Matt Faulkner, and this is Overtime. Now, going back 5 years or so, we used to build 100% spec backup cars that were just as good as the primary cars. We could pull these cars out in about 6 minutes and have them on the track ready for practice. The downside to that, though, was they were a huge expense. We would essentially take 2 cars to the track that cost just as much as each other, and more often than not even pull the very expensive backup car out of the truck. This was a concern to NASCAR and the sport as a whole. A lot of the next-gen car is to save teams money. And today we're going to talk a little bit about what NASCAR has done to help save costs on backup cars, and a little bit about what next-gen backup cars are like. For next-gen, we are allowed to take certain things to the track as backup cars and not allowed to do certain things. Now, one big reason we are limited on backup cars right now is a general lack of inventory of parts. We can only take to the track what we have. Supply chain for next-gen components is young, and we're still waiting on enough components to have a healthy supply of backup parts at the track. So that's one challenge we have. Second challenge is limitations by NASCAR, and in an effort to save money, we are not allowed to put engines in our backup cars. This saves engine providers money, not having to bring so many engines to the track, which ultimately saves the team's money, not having to purchase as many of those engines. We are allowed to take as many backup cars to the track as we would like, but we specifically only take 2 among 4 cars, and this is due to inventory concerns. And then beyond that, we take parts and pieces that we think we might need to replace. But I think it's important to note that with only 2 backup cars, we can't do certain things like wrap the cars. We can't put individual drivers' seats or pedals in the cars. So if you watched on TV over the weekend on Saturday, you probably noticed Kyle Busch's car, we were putting seats in, we were putting pedals in, we were wrapping it to his sponsor scheme for that week, and doing those things to get that car ready for him, because that car was shared with another driver. There's certain things we can't do to that car to make it so that we would have to unwrap it to rewrap it, or take a seat out to put another seat in. So we err on the side of not putting some things in those cars to make it able to prepare for one of 2 drivers. When you prepare a backup car, it takes a lot of effort. There's not a lot of time. There's a lot of guys working on a single car in a tight space under a time crunch, and it's pretty risky that everything's actually assembled correctly. And you could see. I think there was one issue with Kyle's car on Sunday where he had the shifter was jammed, and luckily we were able to address that early without any major issue. But there's also a concern from NASCAR. NASCAR wants every car that races to have some laps on it from a safety standpoint. If the car leaks oil or if something's loose, that car could wreck instantly, and they'd rather have that happen in practice than in the race. So it is a work in progress with the next-gen car to figure out the best way to let teams bring backup cars to the track so that we can get it ready in the most appropriate, quickest amount of time, and NASCAR is satisfied with the money being spent on backup components. You may have noticed that over this season in the first few races, a lot of teams have chosen to fix their primary cars instead of go to their backup cars. This is something new. In the past, we hardly ever fixed a primary car. You would just pull the backup car and go. Reasons for this are a few. One reason is the next-gen car has separate body panels that bolt and unbolt to the car. They're not sheet metal anymore. They're a composite, and you could remove one after a wreck in practice and put a new one on and maintain the shape of the car, whereas before with a sheet metal car that was very difficult. You can also unbolt the front and rear clip of the chassis. So looking at this car, for example, if you remove the body panels from the front or rear, and for the rear, for example, like when Kyle wrecked on Saturday, you can feasibly remove only the tail and then disconnect the prop shaft and the transaxle and remove the entire rear clip from the car kind of that easily. The old car, that was impossible. So We've seen several cars that have wrecked pretty bad in practice this season opt to fix their primary for that reason. We could not do that on Saturday because the roof of Kyle's car was cracked and damaged, and it would be very difficult to swap a roof on a primary car and get it accurate for inspection. So we opted to go ahead and fix the backup, or go ahead and go to the backup car rather than fix the primary. But I think you saw Kevin Harvick wreck pretty bad at Fontana and fix his primary. Also, I can think of Harrison Burton wrecked in the duels at Daytona and also fixed his primary car. So very possible to fix primary cars. I think it's also worth noting that things we bring to the track will change. We'll still bring backup cars to the track, but I think you'll see teams bring front and rear chassis clips with suspension already prepped on them to swap out after wrecks in practice or qualifying. And that's something that wasn't an option in the past that is now with the next-gen car, and I imagine you'll see a lot of that. Maybe we won't all have backup cars, maybe we won't all have the inventory to do that, but we should have the inventory to bring a couple backup cars and a couple pre-prepared front and rear clips for swap if we need. In conclusion, I'd like to applaud everybody at Joe Gibbs Racing and the guys at the track. They were on the ground fixing the car, but there were guys at the shop communicating what parts we had, what parts we didn't have. It was really cool to see everybody work together, and not just everybody from the 18 car, but everybody on every team working together to fix that car. I think it took like 24 people, 11 hours to fix that car. So the amount of man hours that went in it were huge. It was also very cool to see that car so competitive the next day. It was easily good enough to win the race. Didn't work out due to that late caution, but to see the 18 group wreck in practice, spend all day Saturday fixing that car, and then have a chance at winning was a really, really cool thing and a really proud moment for Joe Gibbs Racing.